Welcome to our session on using Google Earth. And this is Stephanie Parker. She is the media librarian at Warner Elementary in Jessamine County. And she'll be telling us all about this. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
How's everybody's day so far?
Good.
Mine's been great. I sat in on a copyright presentation that was a lot more interesting than copyright has any right to be. So that's super helpful. Thank you. I do have a bit.ly up here that'll link you to this presentation, and I recommend that you go ahead and visit it now. I have been told that if you don't have a device with you, that you can use the computers that are at these desks. I think it's a good idea for you to go ahead and link to it just because there are some hyperlinks that you're going to need later. Thank you. I was like, oh Lord, what password? So if you're already at this bit.ly, you will notice that there aren't a ton of slides. And that's because there are some links that I'm going to take you to and that you're going to use later. But also, I wanted to make sure that I gave plenty of time for you to actually create and ask any questions that you might have. So I'm Stephanie Parker. I am the library media specialist and the digital learning coach at Warner Elementary in Jessamine County. My email is on that first slide, so if you need to reach out later with any questions or for help, please feel free to. That is in Jessamine County Schools. Anybody else here from Jessamine County? Hello, Myra. Hello, welcome. Glad to see you. All right, so before I get started with the actual meat of this, I just want to talk for a second about why I chose to put this presentation together. So last fall, oh, by the way, if at any point you need me to stop and slow down, please do. I've had lots of coffee today, so just tell me to slow down. Last fall, I had a fifth grade teacher who approached me and said that she was really having trouble with some of our power standards in social studies for fifth grade. And because she was really struggling with getting the kids to connect to the material that she was teaching, because she was teaching about the American Revolution. And I remember as a kid learning about that, it was really difficult to connect to it. When you are 10 years old, something that happened a couple hundred years ago doesn't even seem real. How are you supposed to really engage with it and see it in an authentic way? And so in talking with her, she really wanted to focus on not just what happened during the American Revolution and the lead up to it and the people involved, but how it affected the relationships with people within their communities and within their environments, the ecology of the American Revolution in terms of like why people migrated to certain places and how they interacted with the environment and the resources that were there. And so I thought, you know, Google Earth has made some really big improvements in the last few years, and everything she was saying, I thought like these kids could just see it. If they could see it and think about the way that these places looked back then compared to how they look now. But in Nicholasville, Kentucky, with some of these kids who've never even been to Lexington, Kentucky, just a few minutes down the road, like how do we get them to actually visualize what the Boston Harbor looks like now and think about like what it might have looked like then. So Google Earth is what came to mind. And I thought, well, you know, we can not only get them on Google Earth and teach them how to use Google Street View to see what these places look like now, we can also let them use Google Earth to build a map of all these different places. And we can go in chronological order. We can go in order of the historical significance, whatever the teacher thought was best, I was ready to do for her. I will say if you are a classroom teacher, please reach out to your media specialist if you are in need of any kind of, if you're wanting to collaborate with somebody, we're there to take some of the weight from you. If you are just like, I've been teaching this the same way for the past 10 years and it's really lost its oomph, come to us. We're there to help you, especially to inject some technology into it in ways that are meaningful and find sources for you, help you teach certain things like copyright law. We're there and we are itching to help. We love to collaborate with you. So please reach out to us if you have a media specialist in your school. If you are a media specialist, then hopefully you will leave today, or something similar like a digital learning coach, hopefully you will leave today with some new ideas for ways to use a not so new tool, which is Google Earth, but there are definitely some benefits to using Google Earth that we didn't see several years ago. There's a lot of new stuff there. So I approached her with this idea. Let's use Google Earth to turn what you've been teaching about into an interactive project that the kids create. So she's not just creating something for them. I'm teaching them how to use Google Earth to create a project, and then what she is teaching them about in the classroom in terms of the people who were involved in the American Revolution and the places and how people were moving. They were going to take that and create their own projects in Google Earth that they could share with others. So why did I think about Google Earth? I talked about it a little bit, but one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to use Google Earth is that it is really engaging. Has anybody used Google Earth with their kids before? Several of you. So you know that once they start using it, they are like little crocodiles in a feeding frenzy. What else can I do? What else? Where's my address? Where's my school? Where's this place? Where's that place? And they want to show everybody. They want to share with others. They want to talk about these different places they see. And so you've already got that engaging aspect of it. And also the fact that they want to show other people what they find. And so I do recommend that you plan some additional time to let students play with it before you actually have them start on a project like this. Because if you don't give them that time, I promise you they will take it later when you don't want them to. So build some time in so that they can look for, give them some ideas for places to look. Not only their address, but maybe their favorite store or the public library, where they go to church, you know, different places that they're really familiar with in the community. Give them time to look at those places and share them with their friends. Maybe they could start a practice project first, adding those different places in their community to a project. Google Earth is super versatile, and I learned this a couple years ago. I was just teaching Google Earth as a digital atlas when I taught, oh my goodness, I've forgotten the word, periodicals to my kids. We would also bring in references. We would also talk about atlases that are books on the shelf, and then compare and contrast a digital atlas like Google Earth with a paper atlas. And so I took that and I thought, well, there's so many things you can do with it, creating maps and paths. And we're going to talk about some of the different ideas for projects that I've come up with. And hopefully, that is, I'll hear some more from you that I can kind of bank for later. And student connections are so important, and using Google Earth, because they can start little with, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the book Me on the Map, but it's about this kid who starts really little, like here's a map of my room, and here's a map of my house, and here's where I am in my house, and here's my street, and here's where I am on my street. So it kind of helps them make those bigger connections globally, or at least within the United States, or at least within Kentucky. Like, it helps them see where they fit in with the rest of the world. When I was in 5th grade, I remember that was the first time I read a book that had the word England referenced in it. And it was like, my mind was blown. Like, England is a real place? What does that mean? And it kind of helps them to see what it means. That, I know it sounds really silly and simple, but it is truly kind of a real moment for little kids when they realize there are other places besides the place where I live and the place where my grandparents live and maybe the place where we take family vacations. There are other places out there too. It also gives you a chance to have a meaningful use of technology, which is a big push right now. I remember when I was in college, when we would have the technology portion of our lesson plan that we would have to fill out. I don't even remember the name of the specific format from years and years and years ago that we had to do. There was always a spot where we had to list if we were using technology. We were always pushed to add some technology in there. And I remember professors saying, I mean, like, are you going to use a projector, an overhead, an overhead? I just really dated myself. Anything, just add that in there, just have something in that box. That's not what we want to do. I don't know why it was thought of as a good idea back then, but now we know definitely, like, we don't want to just have technology to say, yeah, we use technology, don't worry about how we used it or whether it was authentic or meaningful. Now we're really pushing for something that's not just something the kids could do with pencil and paper. We want it to be a real actual enrichment and enhancement. We pay a lot of money for this technology. We want it to really be worth it. And so Google Earth provides an opportunity for you to use technology in a way that's more meaningful and more authentic, in a way that you couldn't just use pencil and paper. So there are some examples available here as well, which is another reason I think Google Earth is a good option. There are some examples at this link of projects that professionals from working with Google have created, but they're just kind of some things you can share with your kids or take a look at yourself of projects that have been created around different themes, like a storytelling odyssey, and there's a little description here. A lesson in lifestyle, which is a project that shows different homes all around the world, people's daily lives all around the world. An Arctic expedition. There are so many things. There are simpler ones too, like ABCs from space, where they use images from NASA that show overhead shots of different places in the world that make letter shapes, either by accident or on purpose. So these are just some examples that you could show the kids first, and also look at yourself to see what sort of things they could create. Earth for sixth graders, like there's Earth for fifth graders, all kinds of things that you can take a look at before you begin. Just to kind of give you, not exactly a goalpost, because again, these are created by grown-ups who work with Google, but just an idea of what they can look like and how they can be used. Any questions so far? All right. So it is also important that we address standards when we're planning our lessons and we're teaching. So I wanted to show you a list of all of the standards that the social studies and fifth grade teacher and I were able to address with just this one project. So there's several of our social studies standards and my standards in the library, and then there were more technology standards, but I included just one because it made one nice neat slide. But there were more we could drag in there. Those were just some of them. And so I'm not going to read these to you. I figure you can probably read them if you have a burning need to on your own. But as you can see, there are several that we addressed with just this one project, which was really exciting. So start with skills that you need first, because before you can teach something to the students, you need to know how to do it yourself. And this is, if you're a classroom teacher, where you can bring in your media specialist and say, hey, I don't really have time in my schedule to teach them how to use Google Earth, but I really want them to use it for this project. Could you please make sure that they know how to practice these skills in the next, give them a time that you want to start this project with them. Could you please teach them these things so that when I am putting together this project later and I'm having them get started, they already at least have some experience with it, so I'm not starting from scratch. If you are just starting with a project that you create on your own and you share with your students, just to have a different way to share your content with them, these are also the skills that you will need to be able to do that. So you need to know how to open Google Earth, and that's pretty easy, earth.google.com, or you can go to the apps if you're signed into Google, if you just open up Google and choose Earth from the apps. You'll need to know how to begin and name a new project. The title is important because it lets you search for it later. I always try to really express that importance to the students, and I always have kids who still don't have a title, but they're learning, we're getting there, it's okay. You'll need to know how to add a location, how to edit the information, because when you add a location, If you search for it and you choose something from Google Earth, it's going to automatically pull in Wikipedia information. And contrary to popular belief, I don't think Wikipedia is a bad source, but it's not something that we want our kids to do is just use someone else's words. We want them to fill in based on their own research, because that's part of my standards, is teaching them how to do research, teaching them research skills. And it's also something classroom teachers want them to be able to do too, to find sources, use those sources, and look for specific information that they can use. And so that's an opportunity to teach that as well. So you need to know how to edit that information, how to add images, because it makes it more engaging, and also how to share your project with other people. Now, if you click on skills you need here, it's going to take you to a page from Google that has, here we go, a student activity page, or PDF, sorry, several pages. And it just has a few pages with really quick tutorials. Here's how you do these specific things. So these are like really boiled down, really simple. What I wouldn't do though is just give these to your kids and say, go hog wild. If it's something where you want your students to produce a project, really take a look at this and read, because there are some places where you may not want them to have to do a certain thing that it teaches in this activity. Or there are some other parts where it gives you some options, like there are 3 buttons that allow you to share, delete, or export your project as a KML. If you just tell them, do this, they're going to go, I don't even know what that means. Or the smarter students may say, well, which one do you want me to do? So take a look at it and use this as a source for creating a roadmap for your students, to tell them what exactly you want them to do for their project. All right.
We have a question. I don't know if you want to answer it now or.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So one person wrote that they loved Google Earth. They used it in the library. However, they stopped using it last year when the student shared the blue dot, which blue dot to click near the Great Wall of China, which reveals a man in his birthday suit. So up to that point, she said she stopped using it. Then somebody else asked the question, I'd like to know, do you know if there's a way to turn off that feature?
To turn off Street View in the photosphere. As far as I know, there is not, but you can report images like that to Google. And since it's like there's a big push with Google Education right now, if it is something that is like, I won't use this anymore, we can't use this in the school system if you don't fix this, they've been pretty good about responding to those reports. Other things, unfortunately, like, hey, this doesn't function in a useful way. Sometimes they're not so great about that, but if it's very clear, like, yeah, teachers can't use this if it's going to be like this, like, please report that photo, report that image, so that it's not just staying there for somebody else to find. Also, students.
Yeah. Right.
I love them and I can't stand them also.
So they're asking again, so you're saying report to Google, correct?
Yes, report that image, please. Also though, it is, parents won't love this, but it's true. We cannot shield students from everything in the world, especially when they're online. We can put into place firewalls and other things, and we can put into place rules that say students cannot do this or they can only do this. But students find ways to skirt those rules, and they do it on purpose. And it's a normal kid thing. We wish they wouldn't do it, but we did it too. So we can't shield them from things. It's a good opportunity. I say that while grimacing, just to kind of teach them how to appropriately interact with the world. If you find something like that, you might get in trouble and get your friends in trouble if you then proceed to share it with all of them. If you quietly take that to your teacher and say, hey, I saw this and I know it's not appropriate, that gives your teacher an opportunity to say, are you okay? Do we need to talk about what you saw? Thank you for reporting that to me. Now I can take steps to make sure that it's taken down. Do you need anything? Are you okay? Because there are students for whom that would be traumatic to see. Most students probably are just going to laugh at it and try to sneakily share it with their friends. But that is something that I talk about with my students, especially in the library. They take art books off the shelves all the time and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
this person's nude side. Like it's not like that. Like it's how human bodies work and muscles and it's not supposed to, it's not meant for that.
I'll also say that's probably a rare instance. Like I've clicked a lot of blue dots.
I've clicked so many blue dots. That kid really had to work for it.
I mean, they were like exploring.
Like part of me admires the tenacity.
Like I'm looking right now, I don't see it. There's lots of dots.
Maybe somebody reported it already.
That's
I
very,
love
very
that the
possible.
response from at least one teacher in this room was to be like, I gotta go on. You're just the only one who admitted to it.
It's a lot of cool pictures of the Great Wall.
Yeah, and then there's that one. And it may be cool, I guess, depending on your perspective. All right, so anyhow, those are the basic skills with Google Earth that you will need to be able to create a project and that your kids will need to. There's some other fun stuff you can do that I'm going to show you later to mess around with the aesthetics, but these are the basic things that you definitely need to know how to do. All right. Now that my armpits are all spicy talking about that new photo, let's talk about student projects for just a moment. If you would like for students to complete a project on their own, they first need basic knowledge of Google Earth. Like, don't go in if they've never seen Google Earth before and be like, now let's start a project, kids. Like, first they need to know, and again, if you're a classroom teacher, this is something you can ask student engagement specialists to help you teach. Students need basic knowledge, like getting to Google Earth. My fifth graders, it doesn't matter how many times I tell them that didn't seem to this year how to get to Google Earth. I still had a couple at the end of the year who go, I forgot. And then thank goodness there's sweet little babies at their table with them could show them and we're happy to, but they're gonna need you to teach that to them first. How to use the search bar that's on Google Earth. How to use Street View, apparently not at the Great Wall of China. And then how to use Voyager, because Voyager is a tool that can let you look at a whole lot of projects that are already made. Students will also need to learn those skills that were on that previous page previous slide before they can get started with the project. And then I've linked here again that student activity from Google Earth, just as a source for you and for your students. It later may be a good thing to give them just so that they have a reference. But again, I wouldn't start with that. I would just use that as a source to create your own organizer or assignment that you give to your students. All right, so I would like to try this in just a moment. But first, I want to show you how to do some different things on Google Earth. So I know this says try it right now, but give me just a minute, because first I would like to take you to Google Earth and show you what it looks like to create a project. So if I go to earth.google.com, it takes a while. I always tell my kids, because they complain about how long it takes, I always have to tell them the Earth is a big place, guys, and your computer is loading the whole entire Earth. You're going to have to be patient. It has to go to space first and then bring back those pictures of the Earth. So once it loads, if you look on the left side of the screen, this is where you see, open this up if you want to, but your basic menu looks like this. This is where you see your search bar. There's the Voyager tool. Here's the Feeling Lucky button, and if you click that, it just takes you to a random spot. This is our projects tool. So if I click that, I'm going to see some different projects here that I've created. This one, the Falls of the Ohio virtual trip, is one that I created for KET. So if I click on that, it's working. Sorry, got impatient. I can see all the features that I've already added, and it gives me the opportunity up here to share it. This will reload my project if I need to, and this will delete my project. These three little dots here, if I click on those, I get a few more, like I can copy the project report inappropriate content. Remember what that is? Or I can export as a KML file. There aren't a ton of situations when you would need to do that. If I click to share it, it's going to bring up this box that I bet we're all really familiar with, where we can add people to it, or we can give people a link and we can let them either view it or be an editor. And I can copy that link just by clicking on that button to share it with other people. If I add people to it, they can help me work on it, which is nice. If you want to give them a collaborative group project to do, they are able to do that. One person will have to be the owner, and that person could be you. So you could actually have access to it at all times to make sure that they're working on it appropriately. You just need to then add the different kids in your groups to each project that you create. So when sorry, I'm wondering why this isn't going away. Cancel, there we go. So once I'm in here, you can see here it says new feature. This blue button says new feature. This is where I'm going to go to search to add a place. And that is the most basic thing, like searching to add a place. So I can click that and search for Falls of the Ohio. I might choose, I think I already have it on here, but Shippingport Island. And it does show up in my recent searches, but if I hadn't searched for it before, I would still see it as a suggestion in places. After you type a certain amount, it's going to suggest some places for you. And once you click it, it'll take you to it. And you can choose to add it to your project by clicking the button that pops up on the right. Now on the left-hand side of my screen here, you can see all the information. It says provided by Google. So it just gives you like the first bit of information that pops up, because that's usually the most relevant, and usually it's straight from Wikipedia. You can edit that by clicking replace, and then using this text box to type in the information that you find from your own research. When I had my kids do this, and actually when I gave them my example, this is also where I would have them add their citations. So they're right there ready to see. You can change the title of it here, and up top is where you can click to add images of the place. And you can either upload from your computer or your Google Drive, or you can even do a Google image search to add some images to your project.
So if you've been to the place,
Yep.
China or whatever, you can take your own picture on there.
Yes, you sure can. You sure can. You can get them from Google Photos or upload them from your computer. The information box that pops up, that's gonna pop up on the right-hand side of your screen if you choose the small one. I think the large one takes up like half of your screen. I let my kids choose, but again, that's going to be in whatever the roadmap is that you give them, where your requirements are listed. That's where you'll tell them if you have a requirement for a small or large info box. And that's just where any information that you type here and any images that you add, that's going to pop up in the information box. They can also, and this is really simple, but they loved this, my fifth graders did, you can change your pin. So if it's a house, or like what we added the Boston Tea Party, there was one with a little tea kettle on it, or a teapot on it, and they were so excited that there was something that was so on the nose for them. You can also change it so that it is, you can see more here. You can upload a custom icon. You can change the color of it, and you can also change the size of it to make it, the default I think is small. You can change it to large or even extra large. Those are the extra things, like just changing the color and adding your own photos are extra things that are simple, but the kids love it. They really have fun with it. The bad thing is, not bad thing, the difficult thing, the challenging thing is reminding them that the focus is on the content, not on what color their place markers are. All right. Sure.
So there are lots of sites on your project, the Salvation Army, for example. Did you do that, or did Google Earth do that?
Which project, sorry?
that one that you have there. See, it has Salvation Army in the white.
Oh, I'm sorry. So these are just Google Earth. Thank you. The ones that have the little place markers are the ones that I've added. Now this is opened up a little bit too large. I'm glad actually that they said that, because what you can do is zoom in to where you want your audience to see. So if I want my audience just to see specifically Shippingport Island, instead of it being zoomed out like that, whenever it flies them to this part of my project, I can go in, zoom in, and then click on the bottom left hand here, capture this view. And that's the view that my audience will see whenever they zoom to this part of my project. So instead of earlier when it was all zoomed out and you could see all those other places, if you capture the view that you want, it's going to specifically take them to whatever you captured. Does that make sense? And it's not locked. They are able to then zoom out. They can interact with it. They can go to Street View, which I think is really important if you want them to interact more with that area and learn more about it. They can still interact with it, but that initial view will let them know this is specifically the place that this part of your project or my project is going to talk about. Does that answer that question? Okay, thank you. Awesome. Thank you. At any point, you can click the preview button up here once you've made some changes and see what it's going to look like later. I haven't added enough to it for it to let me do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this last one that I added because I don't need it. And go in here. There's my information box. I clicked on that one, my information box. If I go in and edit it, let's pretend like I've made some changes and click preview. And it'll show you what it will look like to your audience. So when my audience goes here, this is the view that they will see, and here's their information box that will pop up for them. And you can see here where I cited my source for this information as well. If you want, you can click on the information box and make it full screen and go through those pictures. So you can see them up close. This is a really cool place to visit, by the way, if you've never been there. It's free and it's awesome, and you can look for fossils. Yeah, it's super cool. When you are ready, you can either present it, like if you're just presenting something to your students, you can either present it by clicking the present button, or you can, like we saw earlier, click the little person with the plus sign and actually add people to it or share a link. When you're presenting, if you need to hop to a place really quickly, you can always come down here and click on table of contents and skip the places, some places if you need to skip, like from slide 1 to slide 6 or 7 or whatever. And you can use these arrows down here to move from one place to the other. My kiddos think it's really cool how it flies from one place to another. And every time I show them this, there's a chorus of whoa. But what I like about that is it shows the physical relationships of one place to another. Because that is something that is really hard to conceptualize if you can't see it firsthand. Okay. There was something else before I moved on that I wanted to show you. And it's left my brain. So is anybody in here not sure how to use Google Street View? Are we all familiar with it? Okay, just in case there's anybody who's on the Zoom call, the Google Street View tool is right here on the bottom right-hand side. If you click that, anywhere that lights up blue, you can click on, like down here near the upper fossil beds, we'll go there. That's part of my project. And it will take you down into the photosphere. And it's a sphere because you can look up, down, and all around. And if you see these arrows, you can also move around the photosphere to see all around that area. You can leave the photosphere by clicking on the arrow up here. This is another thing that the kiddos tend to forget about frequently, so you may have to remind them. They can exit that by exit Street View by clicking on that little back arrow. You can change the order of things just by clicking and dragging. And you can also hide different places if for whatever reason you wanted to, If you were going back later and testing them and saying which places are missing from this project or something like that, you can hide them as well. All right. So something else that you can do is you can add a place mark, which just kind of drops a pin. You can also draw a line or a shape. So if I wanted to, I can draw a line, say from the Falls of the Ohio Interpretive Center over to this area, which is where my upper fossil beds are going to be, or lower fossil beds, sorry. And then when I zoom back out, not when I zoom back out, I'm sorry, press enter to save it. And I give the path a name. Path to lower fossil beds. If you wanted to, you could do like an overall path and just give it a name that says project path, so they can see like we've gone from this place to this place. We've gone from that place to this place up here, so that it can kind of show them how they've moved on the map. Does that make sense? Okay. And then I can preview it here so I can see where my line is. Here it is. You don't have to add those, but it's just something extra that you can do. I'm going to remove it for now. You can also add a full screen or even a folder full of places. If you've got kind of a bigger project or you're building a bigger project, then you can add a specific folder that's maybe something like, these are Civil War battlegrounds. These are significant places like politically for during the Civil War. So you have like things divided up into different folders. But you can also add a full screen slide if you need to introduce something, give a little more information about it. You can click here and add a full screen slide, and it'll pop up looking like a Google slide when you use those arrows as you're presenting or someone else is viewing your project. When they click through those arrows, the full screen slide will pop up. We'll just do test slide.
Once you create one, they don't Google, can you share that on a Google Classroom?
Yes, you can. Yeah, because you can get that link and just copy and paste your link. So I just want to show you, here it is. It pops up at the very end, but you can move it around wherever you want it to. And there's my test slide. So whatever you add to it is going to show up. And then you can move it around to wherever you need it. So if you need a little more explanation for what Shippingport Island is or those outer fossil beds, you could add that. All right, do you have any questions right now?
The only question I have is there a way to find like your project that you make? There's no way to find other people that have already made projects. That's not.
So unless they share them with you, there's not, except you can see those examples in the Voyager tool. So if I go to Voyager, which is right here, you can see like great hikes around the world, time lapse in Google Earth, changing forests. And it also can give you some ideas for ways that you could use this, not just in social studies, but like sources of energy. That's wonderful for a science class. I mean, there's just all kinds of ways that you can use them. We're going to talk about some more, like I said, in a few minutes. Rock climbing destinations for travel projects, for more like a real world example. You can go there, and then you can also use that link that is in, I'm trying to remember what slide it's on. Right here it is. Some examples that are available there.
You talked about having a folder.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way for students to combine their projects into one big project, or in terms of like if one student is doing?
Like if they share it to, like on Google, they can share it to that person and make them an edit.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
You could have all of them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying yes. I didn't answer that question. Other people did. Thank you.
Along those lines, what projects have you seen students create?
So I did have my kids create their own, like, just practice projects at first. Like, if you were going to give someone a tour of Nicholasville, tiny little Nicholasville, where would you take them? And so they added some places that they really like in Euclidville to a map and shared that with me. And then we did the Road to Revolution project, is what their teacher called it. And so I just worked with them, reminding them how to use Google Earth, and she taught them about the places in the classroom. They also had an opportunity in their regular classroom to add those places, but then if they had trouble, we're one-to-one, and they usually bring their Chromebooks to the library anyway. And so if they had trouble with it and they had a question and the teacher couldn't answer it, then they could bring it to the library and I could help them with it. And there were some days that she just didn't have enough time to have them add something. And so I would give the whole class 10 or 15 minutes to work on it, and they had me there to ask questions if they needed to ask them. I do have some ideas for other projects. So I want to show you that, but I also afterward want to give everybody a chance to start their own projects. So I'll show you the ideas that I have first, and then I'm going to give you the rest of the time to start and work on your own projects. Please share them with me because I'd love to see them. And then I'll be here if you need some help, if you have a question, if you're not sure about something. I clicked on the wrong tab, so sorry. Is that making sense? Okay. So one of the biggest things that I want to make sure that you remember is if you have your students create projects, they need a roadmap. Pun completely intended. I love puns. Give them a roadmap and let them know what you want them to include. If you do not give them that, they're going to get really overwhelmed and confused, and it's not going to look the way you want it to. They're not going to be happy with it, or maybe they will be happy with it, but you're going to be like, oh gosh, I can't even tell what content you learned from what you've turned in. You just kind of had fun and play, which great, but you also have to have proof that they've mastered these standards that you need them to master by the end of the year. So let them know how many places you want them to add. Do you want them to mess around with the aesthetics and change the color or the pictures on the icons? How many images do you want them to add? Do you want them to cite their sources in their information boxes? Let them know exactly what you want from them. And then also, if there are areas where they can have some leeway, otherwise they'll ask you a million times, like, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? Can I do this? So if there are other areas where it's going to be student choice, please let them know.
Somebody asked me yesterday, I didn't really know the answer because I haven't tried it. Because in the beginning it wasn't collaborative. Like you couldn't be on a project.
The
together.
Google Earth project,
Yeah,
you can now.
It is now?
Mhm, yeah.
I didn't want to tell them the wrong thing. I haven't tested it out.
I want to say that it's been that way for a couple of years now, but it may have just been in the last year. Who knows? Time has been pretty meaningless since 2020, right? Shoot. All right, so some project ideas. Anyone heard of Google Lit Trips? Google Lit Trips is awesome, but it's a little outdated. And those you do have to download a file to use. You have to sign up, which is, it's fine. It's free to use, but it's a little confusing and it's a bit of a hassle. So with Google Earth projects, you can have students create their own lit trips of books. So it's another way for them to engage with books, with fictional, especially books that they are reading. Have them create lit trips using Google Earth to show like where on Earth these things take place, these events take place in their stories. If it's something like a fantasy, you could also have them fantasy or, oh gosh, I'm a librarian, I should know this, science fiction.
I know where you're
Thank you. Fantasy or science fiction where it may be like a universe that doesn't exist except in the book. You could have them take a look at the environment that's in that book and say, well, where would you compare it to? Where are some places that may be like this? Like, tell me about some things. Are there mountains? Are there rivers? Is it near an ocean? Like, where on earth might that have happened? And it could be just another way for them to kind of connect with that book and relate to the material. Or you could create a lit trip for them. If you're reading a book as a classroom together, it may be another way that you can provide for them to really engage with that story and the characters and events.
I don't know if it's 100%, but most of it's been updated
Yeah.
Awesome.
from the official Google Lit Trip.
Yay! I love that. So you can still use those lit trips.
Like they're good examples, like to get the kids kind of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I am 100% a proponent of not having to reinvent the wheel.
It
if you
just
don't
ended
have to.
abruptly.
So if there are some there that you can use that you don't have to create, wonderful. Google Earth gives you the opportunity to create your own or to let students create their own too. You can also use it to narrate historical events like we did with Road to Revolution, map explorer routes, study indigenous lands. There's a really cool map of the United States, really interesting map of the United States that shows where you live, what indigenous people used to live there. So you can have them kind of interact with that map and then learn about the indigenous peoples who lived in their area or in other areas. You could use it to create a personal narrative. They made their little like tour of Nicholasville projects, which were very cute and very sweet. But you could 100% have them focus on that time they went on a vacation to blah, 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 and this happened, and accompany it with images from Google Earth that show the place that they were visiting or the place where they were when this thing happened. You can have them do a family tree. I loved doing a family tree project in like 4th grade, 5th grade. So much fun. It would have been so much better if I could have, well, in my opinion, it would have been really cool if I could have had something like Google Earth, so that I could actually see like all the places where my family came from instead of trying to cobble together with outdated encyclopedias and atlases, which is what I had to do. That would have been awesome. So your kids could definitely use it for something like that. A timeline of discoveries and events instead of just focusing on the places for your title and your table of contents. Focus on time periods or dates and these things that happened or the people who were significant in those events instead. Also creating travel projects. I remember that being something that was really difficult that we had to do in the English class. Create a whole travel project where we had to figure out how far it was to get to a place, what transportation we needed, how much it was going to cost to get there, where we were going to eat. My God. And again, instead of having an outdated book from our poor little public library about the state of Louisiana, which is what I chose, it would have been really helpful to be able to use something like Google Earth to figure out what route I would take to get there. Would I have to take a plane or could I drive a car? And then I can zoom in to Street View and see like, ooh, what restaurants can I eat at? What hotels can I stay at? Like really create an interactive project that's super engaging for both the creator and the audience. Does anybody else have any ideas for ways that you could use it? There is a measure tool, so if you're a math teacher, that's another possibility.
I was thinking more of like the historical landmarks,
Yeah,
like a list so that they can go to.
yeah, mapping historical landmarks and so that they're like in a spot where they can go and visit them virtually anytime. Landform features, yeah. And you'll find a lot of really good ideas for both of those things on Voyager too that are maybe not as specific as you want, but that'll give you a good idea for some good ideas.
Sorry if you already said this, but I think biographies would be cool too. Like instead of just
I love that.
instead of just regular slides or a regular, just a timeline or something, or they could,
Hello,
map a particular person.
PD. What are you doing?
Yeah, I love that idea. It's similar to like the genealogy project. but
Because it's
for,
virtual and I'm sitting here
our
listening,
fourth
you know, on a
graders do
computer.
biographies every year, and I am going to steal that idea. Fair use.
Now, is there a way on Google Earth, someone can, I don't know, our last session, where you can look back into how it looked at different times?
I don't think so with Google Earth, but one thing that, like, not just with Google Earth, but one thing that you could do is do a Google image search and add that to your project so that you can have in the photos that are provided in your information box, you can see both, this is how it looks now, and maybe this is how it looked 100 years ago.
I've heard they're developing.
All right, I want to give you the last 15 minutes to start your own projects and mess around with it, ask questions. Let me know if you need some help. In Zoom, will you let?
So far, one of the questions that we have is how much time do you generally give students to complete a project? In Fayette County, when a class of 30 are trying to access Google Earth, There's always 2 to 5 students who never get Google Earth to load, causing frustrations all around.
That is really frustrating, and that is one of those times when it's like, okay, I've been sitting here 10 minutes, and I know the Earth is big, but good Lord, let's get moving. This was a semester-long project that I worked on with this social studies teacher, and so because we were working together, we were able to give them more classroom time to work on it. So like I devoted probably 5 different class periods, at hour-long class periods that I have with her students to just letting them work on their projects or teaching them how to use Google Earth. And then she was able to devote some time as well. I'm not sure exactly how much time she devoted per day, but she was able to give them a little more time per day. And I believe she split it up too, because we did have some students kind of picked out that we knew were going to need some extra help one-on-one. So those kids didn't always work on the project at the same time that everybody else did. So doing something like that, having them work in rounds could help with the trouble that they have with use of bandwidth and getting it all to load at the same time.
Some are saying that the thank you link is not working.
Good, excellent.
It worked for us, yeah.
No.
It worked for me.
Well, you have to be signed in, which I'm not.
You do have to be signed in with your Google account. You still get credit even if you can't fill it out right now. This is just for me. So while I would appreciate it if you fill it out later, it's not a huge deal. And we're going to use the rule of 2 feet when you've had some time to mess around with it, and an extension of the rule of 2 feet. And you really feel like you got it, you don't have any questions, you are free to have some extra break time.
Apologies if you said this, but something I found was really helpful is that no matter where you are in Earth, like what you're looking at, if it's Street View or wherever, the URL is constantly changing.
Yeah.
And so wherever you are, you can grab that URL and tell kids to go to that instead of like just say open Google Earth, search the, you can send them straight to
It uses the
what you want them to see.
coordinates. Whenever it changes, you can see the coordinates change on top. And they can also search coordinates.
Okay, so to start an actual thing, you just go to
You go to the,
project,
yeah, with
to
the,
create,
yes, I don't know why I thought I was gonna be able to reach that.
and then you create it in your Google Drive.
Yes, and actually later, so sorry, I'm glad that you said that. If you have not created a project before, this is gonna look different. I'm gonna clear, see if I can remember how to do this.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. Clear recent project. So if you haven't done one before, it's gonna look like this when you first begin. And you can either go into open projects from Google Drive or create a project in Google Drive. I'm glad you said that because I'd forgotten about that.